What would you do if you opened your eyes to absolute darkness and realized you couldn't even lift your arms without brushing against cold, wet concrete? You try to steady yourself, but the ground beneath you is slick, thick, sticky, clinging to your skin. The air is heavy with a rotting stench, the kind that tells you death has lingered there far too long. Then a faint strip of light appears from above. Maybe a door creaks open. Maybe someone moved something. And in that thin beam, you see them. Bodies, piled together, decaying. You weren't trapped in a room. You were thrown into a grave. And that nightmare traced back to one man, Tia, a name that even today sends a chill through parts of China. A killer so methodical, so disturbing, that rumors spread he didn't just murder his victims, he consumed them. Let's go back to where it began. In the late 1980s and early 1990s, a small town in Heilongjiang province near the Russian border developed a grim reputation. People didn't fear it because of the freezing winters or poverty. They feared it because residents kept disappearing. After sunset, someone would be there one moment and gone the next. Whispers spread about a black hole in the city. Some locals joked grimly, "If you're tired of life, go to NHA." But behind the dark humor was real terror. By early 1991, the number of missing persons had risen so sharply that authorities could no longer dismiss it. A special investigation was launched. Officers retraced victims' last known steps, searched abandoned buildings, questioned neighbors. Months passed, nothing. Then in late 1992, a special unit was assigned to the case. They divided into teams, focusing on high-risk areas, especially near the old railway station. That's when an officer noticed him. A young man lingering nearby, nervous, avoiding eye contact, ready to run. Two others stood close to him. Something about the trio felt wrong. When approached, the man bolted. Police chased and detained all three. At first, the interrogation room was silent. Two men, Jia and Liwa, refused to speak. Blank stares, tight lips. Then officers turned to the woman with them, Shu Li. She appeared softer, younger, perhaps more willing to talk. Investigators tried a gentle approach, hoping to earn her trust. Before they could finish a sentence, she said something chilling. "I want to speak to the director of homicide." The room went still. Why would she need the head of homicide? And then she broke. "There are dozens of bodies," she whispered, "buried under a man's house." Police followed the address she provided. It was an ordinary home on a quiet street. Nothing about it stood out. Until they got close. The smell hit first, foul, overpowering. Inside, officers split into teams. One searched the house, the other tracked the odor to the cellar. In the middle of the floor was a crude concrete slab about 2 by 3 feet, clearly out of place. When they pried it open, seasoned officers staggered back. Some ran outside. Others vomited where they stood. Below was a 9-foot-deep pit filled with decomposing bodies. Dozens of them, flesh breaking down into a thick, sickening mass. The stench alone was suffocating. Faces frozen in terror, in pain. This wasn't just murder, it was something darker. Investigators returned to Shu Li and demanded the truth. She hesitated. Then she whispered the name. Tia, the same polite, well-dressed man they had just arrested. Born in 1965 in Naha City, Heilongjiang province, Tia came from a modest background. His name symbolized culture and reform. His parents had hoped he would grow into an educated, respected man. For a while, nothing seemed unusual. Quiet child. Average student. But after his parents died, everything shifted. He dropped out after junior high and took a factory job. The pay was decent, but not enough for his ambitions. He craved more status, more admiration, more control. He charmed women at work with ease, smooth talk, confident posture, a calculated warmth that made people feel special. Even though he was married, he flirted openly. His boss saw the danger and eventually fired him. That was the beginning of his spiral. Odd jobs followed. Petty theft. A growing resentment. His marriage collapsed under financial strain and betrayal. Divorce freed him, but it also unmoored him completely. Then, on July 12, 1990, something changed forever. He met a young woman on the street. Stylish, well-dressed, jewelry catching the dim streetlight. She asked him for a light. He studied her. The handbag. The opportunity. They talked, laughed. She followed him home. Later, as she lay vulnerable beside him, he wrapped his hands around her neck. She fought, scratched, struggled, then went still. Instead of guilt, he felt exhilaration, the control, the silence, the power. Between July and November 1990, more than 20 people vanished in that town. Panic spread, but police had no leads. By then, Tia had drawn others into his orbit. Men he manipulated or coerced into helping him. Together, they lured victims with kindness, promises of work, or simple conversation. Once inside, the door locked. Trust turned into terror. By November 1990, the entire city was living in fear. Doors were locked before sunset. No one walked alone. And then one day, a kindergarten teacher named Shulicia stepped outside after an argument at home, just needing air. She had no idea she was about to cross paths with a monster. It was November 1990. That night, she ended up at the railway station, sitting alone on a freezing metal bench beneath flickering lights. Her eyes were distant, her thoughts spiraling. She had no real plan. Just a small bag in her hand and the emotional weight of everything she had endured. Then he appeared. Well-dressed, clean suit, hair neatly combed, his voice calm and reassuring. "Are you all right?" She stiffened. The town had a reputation. Women had disappeared before. But she quickly rationalized it. Those were other women, she told herself. She was a teacher. Just someone having a difficult night. And this man looked respectable, polite, safe. He smiled gently. "My name is Tia. I'm a factory director nearby. You look like you could use some help. I can offer you a job and a place to stay." Her instincts warned her. Every red flag waved in her mind. At first she declined, but he didn't insist. He simply nodded and walked quietly beside her. That restraint made him seem trustworthy, so she changed her mind. She followed him home. Inside, the house felt cold and unwelcoming. He offered her hot tea. The tea was drugged. After that, her memory shattered into fragments. Darkness, pressure on her chest, hands tightening around her neck. Then nothing. Tia believed she was dead, just another addition to his growing count. He checked for a pulse, found none, took the money from her bag, and carried her limp body to the cellar. He lifted the concrete slab and tossed her into the pit below. Then he walked away. But she wasn't dead. She woke up gasping. The air was thick with decay. When her eyes adjusted, she realized she wasn't lying on soil. It was soft, wet, almost gelatinous. Then the horrifying truth hit her. She was lying on decomposing human remains. Dozens of bodies melting into one another, limbs tangled, faces barely recognizable. She was standing on the dead. She screamed, but no one heard. Nausea overwhelmed her. Panic clawed at her chest, but one thought cut through the terror. Her child. She couldn't die there. Driven by sheer survival instinct, she searched for a way out. She climbed onto more solid remains, using them like steps. It wasn't enough. The pit was too deep, nearly 9 feet. So she dug her fingers into cracks in the wall, scraping her skin raw, pushing upward inch by inch. Somehow, she made it. She pulled herself onto the cellar floor above, drenched in sweat and filth. And then she saw him. Tia stood there, staring in disbelief. "Well," he said coldly, "I'm impressed you're still alive." He grabbed a shovel and aimed it toward her head. She collapsed to her knees, sobbing, begging for mercy. She promised anything at all, if he would spare her life. For a moment he hesitated. Then an idea formed. Instead of killing her, he would use her. "I'll let you live," he said, "but you will bring someone to me. And if you refuse, your husband and your child will suffer." Terrified, she agreed. From that moment on, she lived like a prisoner, obedient, hollow, constantly afraid. She had chances to escape, opportunities to scream for help, but she believed his threats. So she stayed, and she lured. Between early and mid-1991, more than a dozen men were drawn in. They believed they were meeting a charming woman. None of them left alive. The violence escalated. Victims were strangled, stabbed, mutilated. The crimes were systematic, relentless. In just 1 year, the group committed 64 criminal acts. 42 people were murdered. Men and women of different ages, different lives, all ending in the same cellar. When the first burial pit filled, they dug another. The town became paralyzed by fear. Doors locked before dusk, streets emptied early. Tia believed he was untouchable. He kept himself in the background, letting others take risks while he controlled everything. But eventually, the net tightened. On October 22nd, 1991, during a province-wide crackdown on fraud and suspicious activity, police noticed a woman behaving strangely at a railway station. She flirted deliberately, scanning for targets. 2 men watched from a distance. Officers intervened before they could leave. Inside their bags were sedatives, fake identification, and cash. At first, it looked like a simple robbery scheme, but during questioning, something shifted. At the end of the interrogation, an officer casually asked, "Is there anything else you want to confess?" She froze. This was her only chance. If she stayed silent, everything would remain buried, just like the bodies. So she broke. She asked to speak to the director and promised to show them the truth, and she did. On October 26, 1991, police and forensic teams searched the house. One by one, remains were recovered. Bones reconstructed, lives accounted for. 42 bodies were identified. Only 28 were ever claimed by families. Tia confessed in detail how he lured victims, how he killed them. When asked how many he had murdered, he reportedly shrugged. He couldn't remember. In January 1992, Tia and his accomplices were sentenced to death. Before execution, they were publicly paraded through town, a practice permitted under Chinese law at the time. Crowds gathered, shouting, throwing insults and debris. Years of fear erupted into anger. Even the woman who had ultimately exposed everything was sentenced. Before her execution, she wrote to her sister, expressing remorse and a strange sense of relief that it was finally over. Tia was executed, reportedly shot once for each confirmed victim. Justice was carried out, but the scars remained. To this day, when people hear that town's name, they don't think of its winters or quiet streets. They think of a house, a hole in the ground, and a man who wore a clean suit and offered a cup of tea. Because monsters don't always look like monsters. Sometimes they walk beside us.